Hi there! Today we are reading chapter 20 of Time for Andrew. Here we go. I woke up hours later. Downstairs, the clock was striking 12. Midnight. Time to do something. I gazed at the ceiling, trying to remember what it was. Overhead, the attic floor creaked, groaned. Andrew. It was time to meet Andrew. Slowly, I eased out of bed. My knees were weak, my head ached. Nothing seemed solid, not even the floor beneath my feet. I felt as insubstantial as the moonlight slanting through the windows. The first thing Andrew said was, "What happened at the trestle?" "Edward fell," I said. "He almost drowned." Andrew grinned. "It's a pity he didn't." It was no joke to me. Suddenly angry, I leaned toward him. "Do you know who Edward is?" Startled, Andrew backed away from me. "Of course I do. He's my cousin, you nincompoop." "He's also Aunt Blythe's father. He's Dad's grandfather. He's my great-grandfather." Andrew's eyes widened. "Are you telling me Edward is the old man in the wheelchair?" "Yes." "Is that right?" Andrew shook his head. "Lord Almighty, I never would have guessed. He must be close to 100 years old. That means—" Still mad, I interrupted Andrew's speculations. "If my great-grandfather had died when he was 12, where do you suppose I'd be?" I paused a moment to let him think about it. Then I said, "I wouldn't exist, Andrew. Neither would Dad or Aunt Blythe." He hugged his knees close to his chest and stared silently at the candle. It was a tiny stub of wax now, barely big enough to give any light. "What we're doing is dangerous," I said. "Things are happening that weren't supposed to, like Edward almost drowning." Without looking at me, Andrew shifted the marbles around, making new patterns in the ring. Although his face was hidden, I saw a tear hit the floor. Then another. "You've given me a whole summer, Drew," he said sadly. "Maybe it's time to go home now and take my chances like everybody else." "Do you mean you give up?" I stared at him, more disappointed than I'd believed possible. "We don't have to play ringer anymore?" Andrew raised his head and scowled at me. "Of course I'm not giving up. Just because I cried doesn't mean I'm a panty-waist coward like you." Getting to his feet, Andrew toed the pitching line. "We'll lag as usual," he said. "Don't think I intend to lose either. You have to beat me fair and square. Those are the rules." Andrew aimed his Aggie carefully. It rolled to stop half an inch past the lag line. Holding my breath, I threw mine after his. It landed a hair closer. "You go first," Andrew said. I'd shot 3 marbles out of the circle when a sound startled me. Hannah was standing at the top of the steps, staring at me. "Andrew, what are you doing out of bed? You're ill. You need to rest." I crouched beside the ring, speechless with surprise, but Andrew jumped to his feet. "Hannah!" he cried. "Hannah!" Although he was right in front of her, Hannah didn't see her brother. She walked through him as if he didn't even exist. "I've been lying awake worrying about you," she said to me. "When I heard noises, I thought you and Theo were up here, but you're all alone." Andrew clung to his sister. "He's not alone. I'm with him. Look at me, Hannah. Please look at me." Unaware of anything but the cold, Hannah shivered. "Lord," she whispered, "I'm freezing." "You'll catch your death in this draft, Andrew." When I neither spoke nor moved, Hannah dropped to her knees and gazed into my eyes. "You're in a trance," she whispered. "For heaven's sake, wake up." Finding my voice at last, I said, "Can't you see him?" "See who?" Pale with fright, Hannah stared at me. I pointed at Andrew. "He's standing right in front of you." "Have you taken leave of your senses?" Hannah grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "There's no one in this attic but you and me." Andrew was crying now, hanging on to his sister, begging her to see him. But Hannah was too scared by my behavior to see or hear anything but me. Deaf to Andrew's sobs, she pulled me to my feet. "You must go back to bed." "No, I shouted. Not yet. I have to finish this game. I couldn't leave Andrew, not now. Not when I was finally winning. Hannah released me so suddenly I staggered backward. I'll fetch Papa, she cried. Andrew threw himself at her. Hannah, stop, you're ruining everything. I grabbed his arm. Let her go. We don't have much time. Casting a last terrified look at me, Hannah ran downstairs calling for Mama and Papa. Andrew turned to me, his face streaked with tears. Quick, Drew, shoot 4 more marbles out of the ring. Holding my breath, I aimed. Click, click, click. An Emmy, a cat's eye, and a moonstone spun across the floor. But I missed the 4th. Andrew knuckled down and shot at the scattered marbles. Of the 7 in the ring, he managed to hit 2 before he missed. Downstairs, I heard Hannah pounding on Papa and Mama's door. One more, Drew, Andrew whispered. It was hard to aim carefully. Papa and Mama were awake. Their voices rose as Hannah tried to explain I was in the attic, acting as if I'd lost my mind. My hand shook, and the first marble I hit merely clicked against another. Andrew took his turn, hit 3, and missed the 4th. Send me home, Drew, he begged. I don't care if I die when I get there. 2 marbles were left, a carnelian and an Emmy, widely separated. Neither was close to my Aggie. Even for someone as good as Andrew, it was a hard shot. Holding his breath, Andrew crossed his fingers and closed his eyes. I knuckled down and aimed for the carnelian. Click. As Papa tramped up the steps with Mama and at his heels, the 7th marble rolled into the shadows. My Aggie stayed in the middle of the ring. Andrew let out his breath and stared at me. I'd won. What would happen now? Chapter 21. What's the meaning of this? Papa strode toward us. You've disturbed the entire household, Andrew. Mama gripped his arm. For goodness sake, Henry, don't frighten the child. Haven't you done enough damage? I told you not to whip him. Papa made an effort to calm down. Taking a deep breath, he squatted in front of me. What's troubling you, son? He asked. Surely a spanking didn't cause this. Aching with sadness, I put my arms around his neck. I'd won. I'd finally beaten Andrew. I'd thought I'd be happy, but I wasn't. I don't want to leave you and Mama, I sobbed. Papa held me tight. Now, he said. Where did you get such a silly notion? You aren't going anywhere. While Papa comforted me, Andrew climbed onto his father's shoulders, piggyback style. No one saw him but me. No one heard him say, Hush, Drew, you're shaming me in front of everyone. Ignorant of Andrew's presence, Papa shivered. Fall's coming. Feel the nip in the air? Hannah and Theo were waiting for us at the bottom of the stairs. Mama, Theo whispered. Is Andrew sick again? Mama shook her head, but Theo looked unconvinced. Slipping his hand in Hannah's, he watched Papa lay on my bed. On the other side of the room, Andrew took a seat in the rocking chair. It was obvious he didn't enjoy being invisible. Staring at Hannah and Theo, he rocked the chair vigorously. When that didn't get their attention, he sang, I've been working on the railroad, at the top of his lungs. But no matter what he did or said, he couldn't make his sister or his brother see or hear him. I knew Andrew was sad, but I was even sadder. When Mama leaned over to kiss me, I hugged her so tight she could hardly breathe. I'll never forget you, I whispered. Mama drew back. What did you say? Nothing, I mumbled. I love you, Mama. She smiled. Well, for goodness sake, you little jackanapes. I love you too. Smoothing the quilt over me, she turned to the others. What Andrew needs is a good night's sleep. In the morning, he'll be himself again. Just wait and see. I hope so, Andrew said. Papa frowned. No one will get any sleep, good or bad, with Buster making such a racket. I don't know what ails that animal. While we'd been talking, Andrew had gone to the window and whistled for the dog. Though the Tylers hadn't heard the loud 2-fingered blast, Buster definitely had. His howls made the hair on my neck prickle. Even Andrew looked frightened. He backed away from the window and sat quietly in the rocker. Edward told me a dog howls when somebody in the family is about to die, Theo said uneasily. Papa shook his head. That's superstitious nonsense, Theodore. Surely you know better than to believe that someone as well known for mendacity as your cousin. Muttering to himself, Papa left the room. Taking Theo with her, Mama followed, but Hannah lingered by the bed. I reached out and grabbed her hand. Don't leave yet, I begged. Stay a while. Hannah hesitated for a moment, her face solemn, her eyes worried. Mama's right, Andrew, she said softly. You need to rest. You've overexcited yourself again. We've got all day tomorrow to sit up in the tree and talk. When Hannah reached up to turn off the gas jet, I glanced at Andrew. He was watching his sister from the rocker, his eyes fixed longingly on her face. A little wave of jealousy swept over me. He'd get to be with her for years, but all I had were a few more minutes. In the darkness, Hannah smiled down at me. Close your eyes, she said. Go to sleep. But I'll never see you again. Hannah's smile vanished. Don't talk nonsense, she whispered. You'll see me tomorrow and every day after that. In the corner, Andrew stared at his sister and rocked the chair harder. In the silent room, I heard it creak. Saw it move back and forth. Startled by the sound, Hannah glanced at the rocker and drew in her breath. Turning to me, she said, Lord, the moon's making me as fanciful as you. I thought I saw... She shook her head. I must need a good night's sleep myself. Kissing me lightly on the nose, Hannah left the room without looking at the rocking chair again. As soon as we were alone, Andrew said, What now, Drew? Am I going to be invisible forever? A ghost they'll never see? Standing there in my pajamas, he looked as desperate as the night we'd met. He'd been dying of diphtheria then. Now he was cured, he was home, but things were still far from settled. I was real, and he wasn't. Fumbling from fear, I began unbuttoning my nightshirt. Maybe if we change clothes again, I said uncertainly. If I go up to the attic, if you stay here? Following my example, Andrew slipped out of my pajamas. When I put them on, the cloth felt scratchy and unfamiliar. I snapped the elastic waistband against my stomach, studied the rockets printed on the sleeves, went to the mirror and gazed at my reflection. You look like you did when I first saw you, Andrew said. Except for your shiner. I touched my eye and winced. How will I explain this to Aunt Blythe? That's easy enough. Tell her you walked into a door. He frowned. It's going to be more difficult for me. How can a black eye disappear overnight? Just say it's another example of your miraculous healing powers. Like the fever. No one ever understood how you recovered so fast from that. Andrew leapt on the bed and bounced up and down. In midair, he crowded. Andrew Joseph Tyler, boy wonder. Nothing can harm him. Nothing can kill him. He's indestructible. As Andrew crashed, his mood popped like a balloon. Oh, Lord, Drew, he whispered. I hope I really am indestructible. Buster's giving me the heebie-jeebies. If I'd known he was going to howl like that, I would have never whistled for him. From somewhere behind the house, we heard Papa scolding the dog. By the time the kitchen door slammed shut, the only noise was the shrill rasping of cicadas. In the sudden silence, Andrew grabbed my hand and shook it. I'll miss you, Drew. You've been a regular gent. It was hard not to cry, but I was determined to show Andrew that I could be as tough as he was. I'll miss you too, I admitted. And Hannah and Theo and Mama and Papa. I never had a brother or a sister or a dog of my own before. But you won't miss Edward. He'll be there waiting for you. Andrew meant it as a joke, but neither of us laughed. Suddenly serious, I gripped his shoulders tightly and stared into his eyes. How will I know what happens to you? Look in the graveyard, Andrew said, in a melancholy voice. If you don't see my tombstone, you'll know I didn't die. He laughed to show me he was joking again, but death was even less funny than the old man in the wheelchair. Reaching out, Andrew crooked his little finger with mine. I live, I'll find a way to let you know, Drew, he promised. I owe you that much, and a whole lot more. After a little silence, Andrew's face brightened. You don't suppose you could stay, do you? Just think of the fun we'd have playing tricks on Edward and Mrs. Armiger. He laughed at his own thoughts. Why, we'd make their heads spin, Drew. They wouldn't know one of us from the other. For a moment, it seemed possible. My mother and father were away. They wouldn't miss me. As for Aunt Blythe, well, we'd think of some way to let her know that I was all right. We were bouncing on the bed, singing Yippee-yi-yi-yi, when the door opened and Mama appeared. It was Andrew she looked at, not me. Why are you still awake? She asked. I told you to go to sleep. As Mama approached the bed, Andrew flung his arms around her. You can see me, Mama, he cried. Oh, thank the Lord. It's me, your own true son, back again for keeps. She stared at him, perplexed. What nonsense is this? Of course I can see you. Of course it's you. Who else would it be, you silly goose? I slid off the bed and ran to her side. Me, I shouted. It could be me. When Mama didn't blink, I tugged at her nightgown. Look at me, I begged. I'm here too. We both are. Andrew and me. Can't you see us both? I hugged her, but all she did was shiver. No wonder this room is so drafty, she murmured. The attic door is wide open. Andrew and I stared at each other, his face reflecting my disappointment. He was visible. I was invisible. Like the design on his quilt, the pattern had reversed. Sadly, I released Mama. As I turned away, Andrew whispered, We'll meet again, Drew. I swear it. Mama looked at him. What did you say? Oh, nothing. Hiding his face from his mother, Andrew winked at me and said, I was just talking to myself, Mama. I took one long last look at Andrew. Much as I wanted to stay, it was time to leave. When Mama reached out to close the attic door, I slipped through it like a ghost. The door shut behind me. I was alone at the bottom of the dark stairs with nowhere to go but home. All right, until next time, I will be reading chapter 22 tomorrow. And let's see, I think we only have, there are 24 chapters. So tune in tomorrow for chapter 22. Bye-bye.